Hi everyone, my name's Jazz. I'm a yoga teacher with Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, hEDS for short, and I've created this mini yoga practice as an introduction to adapting a yoga practice to hypermobility. Now, I could literally talk for hours on this subject, so I'm trying to distill it down into a little bit of a shorter practice and introduction. It's really aimed at people who suspect they might have hypermobility or already have a diagnosis, perhaps of hypermobility spectrum disorder or EDS like me. Now, this class is going to introduce some of the principles that I work with when I'm teaching yoga or practicing yoga myself as someone with hypermobility. It's also aiming to respect and accommodate some of the associated conditions. So when designing this flow, I was also thinking about fatigue management, about potential for people practicing it having chronic pain, maybe even POTS or orthostatic hypotension. So we are going to start on the floor, and we're not actually going to do anything standing today. So the props that you might need for today is a cushion, maybe a yoga block if you have one, but no worries if not. You can perhaps get a book from the house or use a cushion for what I've got planned. And the first thing we're going to do is start in seated. And you can actually do this from the edge of the sofa or the edge of the bed if you want to do this in a chair. So this could be done in seated this way. You might want to come to cross-legged, in which case sitting up on a cushion can be quite nice. So I'll give you a few moments to get settled and sorted there. I'm just going to grab my water. And once you've taken your seated position, we'll take a moment to orientate to the space around. So being really gentle with the neck, let's take a little gaze over to the right to begin with. And you don't have to turn your head like as far as it'll go. Simply gaze slightly to the right, look down and up a little bit. Again, not as high as you can look up. So we're keeping it not to the end range of movement. We're going a little bit less than we might be able to go. And you can notice what you can see in your room. So have a little look around. Think about the textures, the colours that you see. If you're quite a tactile person, you might even like touch the texture of the floor and of the yoga mat and notice that. Take a look down. And then we will slowly gaze over to the other side, so the left. Same thing, look down a little bit, look up a little bit, but not as high as you can possibly go. And scan left to right slightly on this side, see what you notice there. You could perhaps name the objects that you see. You could use your hand again to touch, feeling the texture of the mat, maybe the floor. From there, let's slowly look forwards and lean forwards and backwards ever so slightly. So you're starting to really build awareness of where your body is in space. And we'll make those rocks eventually smaller and smaller until they're like a tiny fraction of movement. And then it comes to stillness, where you're sitting into the bowl of the pelvis. You can reach up tall through the crown of the head. And notice length in the spine. Notice space in the front of the chest, so between the collarbones. And think about width in the shoulder blades, so width in the upper back. Then here you might like to close your eyes, or you could gaze down at the floor if you want to leave your eyes open. And take a moment here to really feel the points of contact between the base of your body and its support. So whether you're sitting on the ground, a chair, a cushion, you're really noticing that support and that contact that it's making with your body. So you've got this support beneath your body. And you might notice the breath coming and going here without necessarily changing it at all. But there is that subtle movement that comes with the breath, a little rise and fall with the inhale and exhale. And I'd like to really welcome you to the practice here. You might even, if it feels right for you, welcome yourself with that same warm and friendly attention that you would welcome a friend to come into your house for a cup of tea. So you've scheduled in this little bit of time to really look after you. Okay, from there, let's take it down to the floor. So I'm going to pop my pillow over to one side, and I'll invite you to come onto the floor. You can get there slowly. So your head rests on the ground, your shoulders are on the ground, your back, your pelvis, and we'll have the knees bent, the feet on the floor. You can have a little bit of space between the feet and the pelvis. And take your hands, if it's comfortable, to the lower ribs with the elbows wide on the ground. And take a few moments here to really notice the contact of the ground beneath your back body. So you could feel the weight of the head fully supported. Feel the shoulder blades heavy on the ground. Notice the parts of the back that touch the floor and the back of the pelvis, as well as the feet on the ground. If it helps you to bring in a little bit of movement, you could even tap the balls of the feet onto the floor a few times, so you're lifting the toes, and then let the feet settle. And stay resting here. It might be that your eyes have naturally drawn to close, or that you're gazing up at a fixed point on the ceiling, perhaps, if it's more comfortable to have the eyes open. Take a deep breath in. So if it helps to think about slowing the breath down, you could think about taking a slow inhale and feel the lower ribs expand on the in-breath. As you breathe out, you might notice a sense of the lower ribs drawing down towards your pelvis. And you can keep noticing this expansion on the inhale. So maybe even think about it as the sides of the waist expand on the inhale. As you exhale, there's a sense of the lower ribs drawing down ever so slightly, maybe the belly sort of dropping down a little bit. And all the while, keep noticing the contact that your back body is making with the floor. And notice as well if there's anywhere that might be gripping. Sometimes we can like grip or brace parts of the body without even realizing, especially when we're working with hypermobility. There might be these guarding patterns. So notice with your back body here, is there anywhere that it might feel like the muscles are sort of lifting the bones up away from the ground? And is there any space for softening the muscles and letting the bones drop a little closer to the ground beneath you? And you might think, particularly with the exhale, about this softening and this release closer to the floor. We're very deliberately starting this session slowly to ease in and prepare. So a little later in the session, there will be some strength building exercises, some work with stability. But with hypermobility and with associated pain or fatigue conditions, we're really looking to pace and to strike a balance between activity and rest. And what's more, setting up in this slow, gentle way is really intended to support the nervous system to feel safer than it might if we were to jump straight into some sort of movement, stability, strength building. And it might be that slowing down feels a little bit frustrating for you. Maybe it's a welcome slowing down of the pace. So it could be interesting to notice. A lot of yoga practice is really about noticing and with a very non-judgmental gaze. We are going to start to move on to a very subtle movement. So you can stay exactly as you are. Maybe you actually move the hands down to the side to give yourself a little bit more space. Let the backs of the hands be heavy, resting on the floor. Now, as you inhale, start to think about tilting the pelvis so that the points of your hip bones at the front of your pelvis start to move towards the tops of your thighs. Might even be a little arc in the lower back. Then as you exhale, think about gently drawing your lower ribs down and tilting the tips of your hip bones towards your lower ribs. So you're flattening the back into the mat. Inhale, you're tilting the pelvis so the hip bones come forward towards the thighs. There might even be a little arc in the lower back, maybe some slight space between the back and the floor. And exhale, you're drawing the lower ribs down, the hip bones towards the lower ribs and flattening the back into the mat. And you can keep following this movement. Inhale to tilt, exhale to flatten the back into the mat. And it's a very subtle movement, so from the outside, it might not even look like you're doing much. And you can keep a sense of heaviness in the back of the pelvis as you're doing this movement. So we're not lifting up into a bridge. We're keeping the pelvis on the floor. We will be lifting into a bridge later. But for now, we're really focusing on how the breath guides the movement. And that subtle spread of the movement as well. So the movement kind of ripples out potentially. Maybe as you inhale, the chin comes ever so slightly closer to the chest. And maybe as you exhale to flatten the back into the mat, is there a little bit of extra space in the front of the neck? See how it feels for you to keep slowly and gently moving with the breath. Good. Okay, let's pause there. So you can take a moment to pause the pelvis tilt. So you're coming into neutral, whatever feels natural for you here. And then we will start to move it into a bridge. So potentially you might move the feet a little bit closer to the pelvis. I've got my hips about hip width apart. You might even want them slightly wider if that helps you to feel a bit more stable. And what I'm going to invite you to do here is really focus on the connection between the feet and the ground. So if you have your hands by your sides and your head is resting on the floor, you've got your feet on the ground, and think about the balls of the feet connecting to the floor, the outer edges of the feet connecting to the floor, and the heels connecting to the floor. You're going to take an inhale where you are, and let the exhale ground your feet into the floor so that your hips become light and they start to move up. And it doesn't have to be the highest bridge that you can possibly do. Let's make it about half as high. So it's a bit of a smaller bridge, a mid bridge. You could even be quite low if that feels better for you. Take an inhale at the top here with your belly soft. And then let the exhale be what lowers you down. So you're going from the upper back, mid back, low back, and pelvis heavy comes down to the floor. Let's take an inhale here at the ground. Exhale, your feet plant down and your hips begin to lift. Relax the face. Take an inhale, the belly is soft. And then exhale to lower all the way down until your pelvis lands back to the floor. Take an inhale here. Again, exhale, it's the feet heavy on the floor, grounding down, that starts to lift the pelvis. At the top, you take an inhale with that soft belly and exhale to slowly lower down. All the while, you can think about your lower ribs drawing down. Once again, take an inhale on the floor and exhale, the feet press down, the hips lift. Inhale at the top. Exhale, your feet are still in charge as you lower the hips to the floor. And then take a pause there. Hug the knees in towards your chest, maybe wrapping around the shins or behind the thighs. Let's take a little rock side to side. From there, place the feet back to the floor. Hands can be wherever's comfortable. We'll keep the head relaxed. And keeping the left foot on the floor, let's lift the right foot off the floor. Point the toes up to the sky. You can keep a bend in that right knee as you lengthen up through the leg. Take an inhale here. Exhale to reach the heel away and draw the toes down. So you might feel a little bit of a pull in the back of the leg, and then we're going to bend the knee so the foot comes down. Inhale, point the toes, reach up and away. Exhale, draw the toes down, then bend the knee and lower the foot. Once again, let's inhale to point the toes, reach up and away. Exhale to flex the foot, then bend the knee and lower. Once more, inhale to reach up and away, pointed toes. Exhale, flex the foot, and then lower. Take that foot back to the ground. We'll pause for a moment. And this is also known as dynamic stretching, which can be really helpful for hypermobility. So a lot of people with hypermobility might find passive stretching in yoga practices such as yin to be a little bit irritating. So one of the recommendations can be to make the stretching dynamic, meaning that we're moving with the breath. So we're taking a bit of a stretch and then moving, but we're not like hanging out in it, pulling it as far as it will go and making it a big passive forward fold, for example, that you hold for 5 minutes like you would in yin, as that can be pretty irritating for bendy bodies. Let's go on the other side. So we'll lift the left foot off the floor. You'll inhale to point the toes, reach up and away. Exhale, draw the toes down towards you, so you're reaching away through the heel, and then bend the knee, lower the foot. Inhale, point the toes. Exhale, flex the foot, bend at the knee, lower foot. Inhale to point and reach up. Exhale, toes draw down, and then we bend. Again, let's inhale, reach the toes up and away. Exhale, draw toes down, reach heel away and bend at the knee. One more time, inhale to point. Exhale to flex, bend, and this time the foot can come right onto the knee. Let's take the feet a little wider, so about the mat width apart, and then let the knees knock into touch if that feels okay. Of course, everything I'm saying is a suggestion, and you know your body best, so if that doesn't feel quite right, then you can adapt it. Maybe you take the legs out long instead, or have the knees separated. Take another moment here to come back to the breath. So as you inhale, you feel a sense of expansion in the belly, the waist, the rib cage. And as you exhale, there's a sense of the bones heavy to the ground. Okay, when you are ready, let's hug the knees in towards you. Take a little roll over to one side. And take a moment, you could rest your head on your arm. We're really practicing, like I said earlier, slowing down and pacing. So instead of rushing to get up and move on to the next thing, we're savoring this little moment of rest on the side before we eventually will come up to seated. Take an inhale here. And a long, slow, steady, smooth exhale. Then let's eventually come up, and we're moving deliberately slowly. Think about slow motion. And keep breathing all the while as you very, very slowly come up to seated. And what we're doing next in seated can be done from cross-legged on the floor, or it could also be done again on the edge of a sofa, a four-legged chair, or the edge of a bed. So what we're going to work with here is moving back a little bit from our end range of motion, so not going as far as we possibly can into a certain version of a posture. So we're going to work with some side bends here, and what I mean by end range of motion is, for me, if I'm going to come into a side bend, end range of motion, so the furthest that I am able to go, would be like all the way like this. And I could keep going, but I'm not actually going to, because I don't want to pull anything. So one of the really important adaptations for yoga with hypermobility, and I would say this is important for everyone as well, is to back out of that end range. So instead of coming all the way down and over, what I'm going to think about is taking my right hand to the side. I'll keep a little bend in that right elbow. I lift my left arm up, and I'm going to keep a little bend in this left elbow as well. So I'm not hyperextending either of my arms and like locking them out. I've got that little softness in the elbows, in other words, bend. And as I inhale, you can do this with me. Think about breathing length into both sides of the torso, so left and right. Then as you exhale and come up and over, you're still trying to keep length in this side as well as the side opening. And then let's think about moving dynamically in and out. So we'll inhale, reach up, and then exhale to come over into, I'm even doing, I would say, about 75% less than my end range here. So what's it like to really back off of your end range? So we'll inhale up, find length in both sides, exhale over into a little bit of a side bend. Inhale up and exhale over. Okay, let's inhale both arms up. You can spread the hands, keep that soft bend in the elbows. Maybe even spread the face, and that makes me want to yawn. Yawning is welcome. Exhale, we'll circle the hands down. And let's take a moment with the hands on the knees. Notice the effects of that posture. So I can actually feel my heart rate has quickened a little bit with having my arms over my head. So let's give ourselves a moment to settle. Take some slow breaths. And then we'll go for the other side. So left hand out, right arm up. We've got that little bend in the elbows, that softness. Take an inhale to find length on both sides. Reach up and away through crown of the head as well. And exhale, come on over. Remembering we're not going as far as we could possibly go. We're reaching up and away. Inhale to center. Exhale, up and over. Inhale, center. And exhale, up and over. One more time. Inhale, center. Exhale, up and over. Next time you inhale, let's wave both arms in the air, keeping that soft bend in the elbows. You can wiggle the fingers here, and exhale to rain the fingers down until they come in front of you. So if you're in the chair, you're going to come down to the mat now, and everyone will find a 4-point position. So hands beneath the shoulders, knees beneath the hips. And let's have a go a few rounds of cat-cow, and we're going to work on moving a little bit less than as far as we can go. So it can be really interesting with hypermobility to build that awareness of where our body is in space by making the movements a little bit smaller. So let's inhale, soften the elbows. You can bend into them to post the chest through the arms and arc the belly down. And then exhale to round through the back. And start by going to however you would naturally do this, and then we'll work on making it smaller. So inhale to your cow, exhale to round the back, drop the head. And from there, let's start to make the movements a little bit less. So about half, let's try. So you can still soften the elbows, bend the elbows a little bit as you inhale to face the chest forwards and exhale to round the back. Inhale, belly drops down, exhale, round the back. And see what it feels like to do that little bit less. So for me, I actually have to concentrate a lot harder than when I'm going to my full range. Okay, from there, you might want a little break. If this is irritating for the wrists, you can also do it from seated. So that's another option. Okay, from there, this is the slightly like the pelvic stability that we're going to be looking at now, and this is why you might need your block, book, or pillow. And we are using this to get a little bit of feedback. So typically people with hypermobility can struggle with proprioception, which is awareness of where the body is in space. You might even notice that if you find yourself knocking glasses of water over, walking into things, getting bruises because you've walked into the corner of the bed again. I'm constantly walking into things because I just don't seem to understand where my limbs are in space and in relation to things around me. So this pillow or block, whatever you've got, I'm actually going to use a block because that pillow's quite big. It's going to sit on the sacrum. So balance that. And we're using this as a little bit of feedback for where our pelvis is. Let's have the hands beneath the shoulders. And you could have a little sense here of a slight bend in the elbows, if that helps you not to lock out the arms. So I've got a little bit of softness here, and I'm kind of hugging muscle to bone. So I'm thinking about hugging my muscles on either side of the elbow joint to the bone. And I'm thinking about moving my rib cage away from the floor. So see if you can get that sense of ever so slightly lifting your rib cage up and away from the floor and lengthening your lower ribs down towards your hip bones. From there, want to think about keeping the block as still as possible. As you inhale to stroke the left hand forward and the right toes back. We'll stay on the floor for now. Exhale to gather them back to their original position. Inhale, try and keep the block, the pillow, the book, whatever you've got as still as possible. As you move the right hand and left toes forward, you're stroking the ground. Exhale back to center. And again, inhale, other side. So left fingers, right toes slide back. Exhale to center. And inhale, right hand forward, left toes back. Exhale to center. And you can keep moving with the breath, so following your pace. You might want to do an add-on of finding a little bit of balance, so lifting the toes and the hands, getting a moment of air time, and then gathering back to center. If this is feeling absolutely exhausting, then take a rest. Take a child's pose or sit down and relax, maybe even lie on your back or on your side. If it's feeling within your window of tolerance, you can continue to explore this reaching forwards and back, maybe finding a balance, maybe staying close to the floor. And this can be really helpful to have the block because Without the block, sometimes our pelvis can sort of wiggle side to side without us realizing. We might be sticking our leg up super high with that hypermobility, whereas that's impossible with the block. If I was to stick my leg up really high, my block's gonna instantly fall down. So like I said before, it's giving us that little bit of awareness of where the body is in space. Okay, so you might already be resting, which is fab. You might still be continuing, which is also fab. I'm going to invite you all to come back into a child's pose now. So knees about as wide as the mat, arms forward, head rests towards the ground. If it doesn't reach the ground, you can make a little stack of fists to support your head. And if your pelvis doesn't come back to your heels, then you can always start pushing this up to close the gap and give yourself a little bit of support between the feet and the bum. Okay, take a few moments here to really breathe into the space between your shoulder blades. So yes, the inhale is filling the rib cage, the waist, the belly, but can it also spread broad into the upper back? And with each exhale, feel your head heavy towards the ground or the support of your hands. And let yourself settle down here. Remembering that principle of balancing activity and rest. And there's a really lovely quote from a hypermobility movement therapist that I trained with called Jeannie DeBon. You might have heard of her. And she always says, less is more, which I really like. So in terms of integrating these principles into our yoga practice, less is more can mean backing out of end range of motion, doing a little bit less in terms of the movement. But it could also be doing less in terms of not trying to pack loads and loads of strength building into one session, but maybe you do a lot of rest and relaxation focused and then do a couple of strength building bits. Less is more can also mean movement snacks, so doing little bits throughout the day rather than aiming to try and do like 1 hour of different exercises. What's it like to fit a couple of movements in whilst you're brushing your teeth or whilst you're waiting for the kettle to boil? Okay, so from your child's pose, start to rock your head side to side, so you're kind of massaging out the forehead, the brow. And then you're very slowly going to make your way into some sort of relaxation. So find what feels most supportive for you for our final relaxation. Could be resting on your side. That might feel particularly comfortable for you. If you've got the edge of a sofa like me, it can be quite nice to stack the legs on the edge of that sofa and bring the arms wide. You might even take like a folded blanket or a little pillow for behind your head. Of course, you could lie out in full shavasana on the floor as well. And I'm gonna give you a couple moments to set up here, so make sure you are as comfortable as possible for you right now. I know that you might be dealing with pockets of tension, with pain, with other symptoms, so think about how you can make this as easy and supportive as possible, depending on what you're dealing with. And then maybe the eyes feel naturally drawn to close. You could keep them open as well. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a guided relaxation, so follow the sound of my voice. No worries if you zone out. Begin by bringing your awareness to the jawline and to the mouth. If it's available to you, you might even take a deliberate yawn or a deliberate swallow. Then bring your awareness to the point between your eyebrows. So notice that part where you might sometimes frown or furrow the brow. In fact, you can even deliberately take a big frown to notice what it's like to have tension there. And then in contrast, relax the brow, feel softness spread across the forehead and see how different that feels. Then notice the back of the head, so in particular where the back of the head makes contact with its support. And feel the head rest back heavy. Feel a sense of softening down the left side of the neck, the right side of the neck, the back of the neck. Notice the right shoulder blade heavy on the floor. And soften all the way down the right arm, the right hand. So the right arm becomes heavy. Notice where the left shoulder blade makes contact with the floor. And feel a sense of softening all the way down the left arm, the left hand, so the left arm becomes heavy. Feel a softness in the belly. And notice the back of the pelvis heavy on the ground. Soften the right thigh and all the way down the right leg. Feel the support beneath the right foot or the right heel. And then bring your awareness to the left leg, soften the left thigh, all the way down the left leg. Feel the left foot, left heel in contact with its support. And let the body rest here. Perhaps there's a sense of effortlessness, of ease. And we're really starting to place rest with great importance, which can be a little bit of a reframe in our culture. Perhaps pose the question to yourself, what if my body is really intelligent? And if it's telling me how much I need rest? What if I were to listen to my body craving rest? How would that be? To rest completely without guilt, knowing that rest is equally as important as activity. If you've got the time, you can absolutely stay here. Just close down your device and stay resting. If you're ready to end the practice and to be guided into a little moment of closing, then start to gently wiggle the fingers and toes so you're very slowly shifting and stirring awake. You can rock your head side to side. Eventually hug the knees in towards the chest, roll to one side. Take that quiet moment on your side before eventually coming up super slowly. And keep the eyes away from the screen so you can gaze down at the floor as you make your way up to seated. And to close, I'll invite you to bring one hand over your heart space, the other hand on top. Gaze down at your hands or close the eyes. And take a little moment here with the focus inwards. So what can you feel? Check in. How is your body feeling now? How is your mind feeling? if it feels right for you, you might even take a moment here to thank yourself for practicing, for making your way through this guided practice. When you're ready, let's inhale, reach the arms up in a prayer position, blink the eyes open at the top, exhale if you like, you can ground the hands down to the floor and drop the head. So thank you so much for joining me. That was intended as a little bit of an introduction to the way that I teach adapted yoga for hypermobility and associated conditions. So I am putting together workshops to run in person and online on this theme for both yoga teachers who want to accommodate students with hypermobility and associated conditions, and for students themselves who are working with this. You can find me on my website. I'll put all the details in the caption of this video. I also offer one-to-ones remotely online, specifically around this whole topic, where I can support people on a more individual and personalised level, depending what they've got going on for them. So if you're interested in that, then I'm always happy to hear from you, and we can have a free intro call where we can get to know each other and see if we're a good fit. So thank you so much for joining. I'm Jazz. It was lovely to have you here, and hopefully I'll get to make a few more of these videos as well. So if you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. If there's anything else that you want to hear from me, I can do little videos, extra practices, then also let me know in the comments and I can create some sort of video around that. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.